What's up, everybody? Welcome back. If you were a kid growing up in the 80s and the 90s, there is a very good chance you are a huge fan of the Ghostbusters, and in particular, the Real Ghostbusters. And if you know anything about the Real Ghostbusters, it's somewhat of a continuation of the 1984 Ghostbusters movie. Cartoon came out in 1987, was extremely popular, carried on the adventures of Peter, Ray, Winston, and Egon. And the show was so popular that it made Columbia Studios want to make a new movie, which they did, entitled Ghostbusters 2 in 1989. But with the cartoon show being so popular, naturally came action figures. And the Real Ghostbusters action figures were some of the most popular ones out there at the time. But like a lot of these other popular vintage toy lines, they're starting to bring these things back. I couldn't have been more excited to find them. I think I've bought everything that they have released so far up to this point. So we're going to take a look at the new wave of figures and ghosts and vehicles. And then we'll do a little comparison to the originals of the stuff that I still have, because I did have a ton of the Ghostbusters, almost all of them. A lot of them I don't have anymore. And then we'll take a look at some of the other crazy Ghostbusters collector's items that I have in my possession. We'll start out with the original wave right here. I mean, gotta start with Ray's stance, the heart of the Ghostbusters, as they say in the movie, with the Rapper Ghost and the Proton Pack. Like I said, we'll compare these to the original here at the end. Winston Zeddemore and the Chomper Ghost, my favorite Ghostbuster Peter Venkman and the Grabber Ghost, and then the Brains Egon Spangler and the Gulper Ghost. The card backs on these things are almost identical to the original. I mean, they look amazing. The color's a little bit different. I think the original was more purple, but like they did with the TMNT figures, they went above and beyond when they recreated these things, because this is the look, man, right here. This is exactly what they look like. And for collectors who don't want to go out there and spend an arm and a leg, because these things are very expensive anymore on secondary markets, if you want to try to buy original figures, this is a fantastic idea to bring these back. They look great on the shelf. They look, again, you know, if you didn't know any different, you would never know that these things weren't original. So the Ghostbusters toy line had multiple waves of figures. The ones we just looked at was the original Wave 1. Then they started getting a little bit crazy. This was considered the Wave 2 of the original toy line, and it's cool to see that they re-released these as well. The fright features, each one of them, you would squeeze their arm and something crazy would happen, and Peter, his eyes would bug out, and his jaw would drop, and his hair would pop up. Winston, squeezed his arm, his head spun, and his mouth opened. These were cool. I had all of these as kids. So I was real excited whenever I saw they were bringing these back, and gives me hope that they're going to continue re-releasing a lot of these secondary waves of Ghostbuster toys. The Egon, mouth popped open, the tie popped out. You know, and they gave them all, of course, they went away from their original uniforms, gave them like crazy uniforms, a new individual ghost, which each figurine always came with a ghost and a weapon. You already had the Proton Pack, so each one of these figures came with its own unique weapon. And the cool thing is that the weapon worked on the ghost that it came with. As you can see here, that opened up and it would grab right around that thing's neck. Ray's stance, his action was his hair popped up and his ears bugged out. And then of course you had his weapon and the jail jaw ghost, and those forks would reach straight inside and capture him. Here's some of the ghosts they re-released, and of course, the two big ones, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and Slimer, who was known as the Green Ghost. Slimer with all his accessories, the pizza, the watermelon, I don't know if that's a steak or a pork chop or whatever that was. And Stay Puft came all by himself. Here's a couple more ghosts that were released in the toy line. What was weird about the Ghostbusters, the Real Ghostbusters, was that of all the fantastic, iconic ghosts like the Boogeyman and the Sandman and Sam Hain and all that stuff from the show, none of them made it into action figure form, and I don't know why. But they did release other ghosts like this, like Fearsome Flush and the Bug-Eye, which were cool to play with, but these ghosts here never made it onto the cartoon show. So I'm not sure why they did that, why they created a new set of ghosts for the action figure line and didn't bring any of the iconic ghosts from the show into toy form. But still, we still got to have some cool figures. I mean, Fearsome Flush, come on, it's a toilet, you know, that's how funny is that? There was a whole bunch of accessories that used to be able to buy. This one was one of the ones I had as a kid, the Ghost Popper. A little bit different than it was in the original. The original was black, and all it did was shoot little foam bullets out of it. You put it in the front, you pulled that handle back, and you jammed it forward, and then it would pop out. But you also, like I said, you had the ecto goggles and the ghost trap, and the proton pack was really cool. Now this right here, I was extremely excited to see whenever they released this thing. We'll take a look over once we start looking in some of the older stuff that I have. I do have the original Ecto one, and I do have the original box, so we will compare. We'll at least look at the boxes. I haven't opened the re-release Ecto one, so I honestly don't know what the car itself looks like, how different it is, but with everything, you know, all these things are going to have a slight little subtle differences, just to keep resellers from trying to pawn them off as original and jacking the price up when they go to sell them. But yeah, I mean, how iconic is this? This was one of the awesome vehicles to have when you were a kid. If you were a real Ghostbusters fan and you were a fan of the toys, you had to have this. I mean, and the packaging looks almost exactly the way it did. I mean, look at that. That was it right there. You got the chair on the top. You had the ghost that you can grab with the hook in the back. Yeah, this was, boy, did they outdo themselves with this thing. And I really hope they continue this, because the next thing we're going to look at is the one that I really hope that they re-release. And that would be the firehouse, the Ghostbusters headquarters. Here it is in all its glory right here. Fully complete, 100% complete. We've got the Ecto one parked inside. There's the ghost that came with the car. We'll look at the Ecto one first. This is, like I said, this is the original from the 80s. I mean, very basic, very plain. There's really not a lot to it, but it was enough when you were a kid that all the Ghostbusters would fit in there. But the doors would open, had the logo on it. You had the back, which would also open up. A few years ago, when I started getting into these things and building my collection up, I always wanted to make this look more authentic and more identical to the cartoon. So I started buying up a lot of these old Ecto 1 shells, rebuilding them, putting all the parts and pieces together. Then I went out to try to recreate, to make it look like, repaint the whole thing to make it look like it did in the cartoon. And I was able to finish one completely before I kind of got hung up on other things. And I ended up selling it, which was my goal from the start, is to buy a bunch of these, fix them up, paint them up, make them look identical to the cartoon show, and then sell them. And of course keep one for myself, which like I said, I only finished one. I sold it, and I have others that are incomplete, but I'm hoping to get one finished, at least for myself, because, man, it looked really cool. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back too hard, but it looked really cool. And right here, you got the original 4 Ghostbusters. This is the from the 80s right here, and the original 4 ghosts. These aren't my original 4 Ghostbusters, but these are my original ghosts. I have 2 of my 4 original Ghostbusters. Here's Ray. I mean, as you can see, this thing is just completely... The joints are completely loose. I mean, they almost feel like they're going to fall off. This thing has been extremely heavily played with, as has Winston. They're the only 2 that have survived. Peter and Egon had been broken and thrown away years later, but again, I mean, you can see how loose these joints are and how heavily these things were played with. But these are my originals from probably, boy, I want to say 1988 or something like that. And the ghosts are my original ghosts. The figurines, though, these ones here, I was able to buy online. And I'll tell you what, I don't think these things were ever played with. They were taken out of the package, but I don't think they were ever played with at all. If they were not much. I mean, there's no wear and tear on them whatsoever. All of their joints are just completely stiff like they were the day that they would have came out of the package. I got all 4 of them for a heck of a deal. And if you're wondering, so these aren't the original proton packs that came with it, but there are guys online that make these things. It's 3D printed, and it doesn't have the crazy stream coming out of it like these ones do. It makes it a little bit more convenient when you're displaying these things, or I guess if you were, you know, trying to sit them up inside the car or the house or something, you don't have this giant stream. And there's something else I bought which is extremely cool. It's a piece that goes into the back of the Ecto 1. It goes into the back of the Ecto 1. It holds all of the proton packs. Even has a few little ghost traps, which you never had. The Ghostbuster figures never came with the little traps. These things come off, and this goes into the back of the Ecto 1. Slides right in there. And there's a little tab on this that pulls the tray out. Leaves the base back in there and pulls the tray out. Just like in the movie, just like in the shows. So you can get your proton packs out. And then slide it back in. That is pretty freaking sweet. Well, and finally, here's the firehouse. I'm guessing this is something that everybody wanted to see. Got Slimer. Put Slimer up on top. This is the original Slimer. This is the ghost that actually came with the firehouse, and it has these big hands, and that's what he would do. He would hang it on the side. Yeah, this is the Ghostbusters firehouse. I had this thing as a kid. This is not my original. Again, it would have been completely broken and heavily played with, but yeah, I got all the pieces and the parts to it. Even the fire pole. It came with these right here. The ghost trap. The ecto containment unit. And that's what you used to do. The ghost would go in the trap. The trap would close. The trap would go on top of the containment unit. You would hook it on there, pull it, it would slide open, and then you would shut it. Light is green, trap is clean.
Light is green, trap is clean.
But yeah, the inside of the house, pretty basic. It had these grids on the top that was meant to pour your ectoplasm down inside, and it would droop down below and get on the Ghostbusters, and then it would hit this one and also droop down further into there, which it's kind of crazy to think that ectoplasm, which was nothing more than slime, like all the action figure lines had them. But yeah, I mean, there was the inside of the house. You had this weird picture on the wall, the bookshelf, and that was it. There's really not much to it, but it was cool to have because, man, when you're playing Ghostbusters, you could pull the Ecto one in here. It has these little divots right here where the tires would sit so the car would stay. Yeah, and you could have a lot of fun times with this. The doors, of course, close. And you got the Ghostbuster symbol. Here's some of the later waves. These are the slimed figures. These are all original with the original proton packs. They only got 2 of the 4 masks, but what it was these things used to... They were color changing. As you can see, Ray still has a little bit of blue on them. When they got cold, or squirted them with cold water is what you were supposed to do, because they each came with like a little squeezy ghost. You'd fill it up with water, squirt them, and where they got hit, they would be quote-unquote slimed. And then when they got warm, they would get back to normal. But as you can see, whatever that is that they used is kind of like crusty. Still kind of works a little bit, but yeah, these are some of the later waves. And you couldn't have Real Ghostbusters toys without the carrying case. Most of the action figure lines had these. There was just these little storage cases where you could put your figurines in it. I know the Turtles had one. G.I. Joe did. He-Man. All of them. They all had one. This is my original from whenever I was a kid. Just like everything else, the Ghostbusters were on everything. And if you ever wanted to have a Ghostbusters birthday party, here you go. I never got a Ghostbusters themed party, but you got your cups, your Ghostbusters napkins, paper plate set, Real Ghostbusters tablecloth, and even your little treat bags. Another thing was cool when you were a kid were these lunch boxes. Everybody had these things. Came with the thermos brand, came with a little thermos inside. Of course, I still have the Ghostbusters one. This wasn't my original. I did have one like this when I was a kid. For all those days where you got thrown outside and had nothing to do, well, why don't you go fly a kite? Here we go. We got a Real Ghostbusters kite. Never been opened. Got all the streamers and everything on it. How about the Ghostbusters color forms? You remember color form sets? They're just those little vinyl sticker things that you used to be able to stick to a board. Well, there was all sorts of Ghostbusters books. Each one of these little things, there was a bunch of them. They're all based off of a particular episode, and it's actually kind of cool because inside, they basically go over the whole episode and used actual photos from that particular show. Of course, they had their own comic book series. This followed up on the cartoon show. Like I said, if you're a fan of the cartoon show, you got to get these things because it continues on the adventures of the Real Ghostbusters. One thing they didn't have a lot of, surprisingly, for how popular this was video games. I mean, you had some Ghostbusters video games, but not many Real Ghostbusters. This is one of the very few. It's the Game Boy version, and if you know anything about this isn't even a real Ghostbusters game. It's like a reskin of the Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle, which is also a Woody Woodpecker game, which is also a Mickey Mouse game, which is also a Garfield game. Yeah, this is a reskin of this for the Game Boy only. I mean, and it's not even really that good, but it is a Ghostbusters game. And they did have one of these little LCD games in the same breath as the Tiger handheld. Of course, as a collector, you got to have the the complete series on DVD. Anyways, I haven't even upgraded it to Blu-ray yet, which the first 2 or 3 seasons were absolutely incredible. Then they started making changes. They got rid of Lorenzo Music as the voice of Peter, who was an iconic voice, and they brought in Dave Coulier, better known as Uncle Joey, on the show Full House, and he just didn't do it right, and they started making too many changes, and the show kind of lost its way a little bit. But if you ever have a chance to go back and watch at least the first 2 seasons, maybe I think it's even a third, one of the greatest cartoon shows of all time, without a doubt. And back in the day, yeah, you couldn't buy the whole series and set, but they did sell individual episodes on VHS tapes. I don't know if every episode had their own VHS tape, but I'm assuming the really popular ones did. And here's something probably not a lot of people knew about, was they actually made a Real Ghostbusters board game. It was like one of those 3D games, and there were different traps and obstacles and things like that. You basically had to try to catch all the ghosts. Well, we're going to wrap this thing up here real quick, so we're going to do a little bit of a comparison between the two. Here's the re-release Ecto one compared to the original packaging. I mean, let's look at the price on this thing. Hill's Department Store, $21.97. Wow. I would love to know when the date on this thing was, but if you look at the packaging between the two, I mean, it looks real. It's almost spot on, to be honest with you. The only subtle differences I can see are around the Real Ghostbusters words. They're a lot more vibrant and bold. And on the top, it does say, "Who you gonna call?" Where on this one, it does not. And of course, the captions on it is written in multiple different languages, where on the original, it's only in English. And you do have other text on here that's not on their vehicle, and as seen in the Real Ghostbusters TV show, does not have that on this one. And we'll look at a couple of the figurines real quick, just 2. And here's Peter Venkman, my favorite, and just by looking at the 2 of them, I mean, they look almost identical. I mean, I did a comparison video with the Ninja Turtle figures, and there were a few subtle differences, but these, I mean, looking at the 2 of them side by side, I mean, maybe his face looks a little bit different, but like the hairstyle and the coloring and just all the details, everything on them are almost exactly the same. It's almost impossible to tell if there is a difference. I really don't know if there is. Like I said, maybe in the face might be a little bit different, but that's about it. The ghosts are where you have the major differences. The colors on all of them are slightly different than their original version. As you can see here, that's like a more darker shade of blue. And just to further that point more, yeah, you can see it's almost like it's more see-through than the original. Yeah, and the same with Ray's. That's the way they are. But again, though, I'm sure that's so somebody couldn't open these up, pull that ghost out, get on eBay and list it for $30 and try to tell everybody that it's an original, because it is clearly different. The rubber molds are exactly the same. It's just the shade of coloring on the ghosts are just a little bit different than the original. Here we got the 2 main ghosts, Slimer and Stay Puft. Slimer looks pretty similar to his old counterpart. Maybe the green is a little bit more bright and vibrant, but really, other than that, it's not that bad. The facial expression is all pretty much exactly the same. I don't have any of the accessories, but I'm sure they would be also slightly different. But yeah, I mean, look at that. That's the re-release to the original. Whew, pretty damn good. And then you got Mr. Stay Puft, the most iconic villain in the franchise, I think. Well, Ghost, I should say. Because sometimes in the show, he's not really a bad guy. He does help them out on occasions. But as you can see here, aside from the fact that this has been played with and is yellowed, I'm guessing the coloring is probably the way it should be. I'm assuming when this was brand new, it was nice and bright white. The big difference is, as you can see, the face is slightly different. It almost looks like he's looking to the left, as in the original he's looking straight forward. That's really the only difference I could find between the figures, because everything else, the hat, his vest, the tie, everything looks exactly the same. It's just his face is just a little bit different, but that is enough to differentiate the two. Well, guys, that's about it for this video. My final opinion on the re-released Ghostbuster figures: they're awesome. As you just saw, there's not really many differences from the original. The packaging looks awesome. The figures are extremely detailed. This is another one where they really knocked it out of the park with these. They're absolutely incredible. They look just like they did. They give you that huge wave of nostalgia that you would expect from something like this. And I am hoping and praying that they continue with these toy lines. I know there's rumors out there of the Ecto Glows coming out, which are the holy grail of Ghostbusters and one of the most sought after vintage toys of all time. So hopefully they continue to make these things, and I would love to see this come back out. And even though I have the original, I would absolutely buy the remake. That's it, everybody. My final opinion on these things, again, like I said, they're fantastic. If you're a fan of the show, have a soft spot for the Real Ghostbusters, and you're thinking about picking these things up, do it now before they're hard to get or before the scalpers buy them all up, and you can only find them on places like eBay. So thanks, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you next time.